The stars had always been silent, and humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the vast darkness of space. That question was answered on a cold morning in December when 12 alien ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. The vessels were beautiful in a strange and terrifying way, with hulls of polished silver metal and towers of blue crystal that caught the sunlight and scattered it like diamonds. News spread across the planet within minutes, and billions of people looked up at the sky with fear and wonder in their hearts. Governments scrambled to respond. Militaries went on high alert, and the United Nations called an emergency session that would change the course of human history. Ambassador Thilas Varan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Serenity of Purpose, and watched the blue planet rotate slowly beneath him. He was tall even by Valkyrie standards, with 4 arms and a face dominated by large black eyes and clicking mandibles that served as both mouth and expression for 3,000 years. His species had ruled a vast empire called the Dominion, and in all that time, they had never failed to bring a new species under their control. The method was always the same, and it was elegant in its simplicity. They would arrive with diplomats instead of soldiers, speak of friendship and protection, and let the primitive species see just enough of their military power to understand the truth. Resistance was foolish when the alternative was annihilation. 237 species had joined the Dominion through this method, and Varan saw no reason why the humans would be any different. His scouts had studied Earth for decades, watching their transmissions and learning their languages and measuring their technology. The assessment was clear and unanimous. Humanity was primitive, divided, and weak. They had only recently learned to leave their own planet. Their nations fought constantly among themselves, and their weapons were laughably outdated by galactic standards. This would be easy. Vorn adjusted his ceremonial robes and prepared for the shuttle that would take him to the planet's surface. He had given this speech many times before, and he knew exactly how it would go. The humans would be afraid at first, then grateful when they understood the protection the Dominion offered, and finally obedient when they realized they had no other choice. It was the natural order of things, the strong guiding the weak. And Varan felt no guilt about his role in this process. He was bringing civilization to a barbaric world, and they would thank him for it eventually. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere and landed in a city called New York, where the United Nations had its headquarters. Vorn stepped out onto the platform that had been prepared for him and took his first breath of alien air. It was thick and wet and smelled of chemicals and life, and he found it unpleasant but tolerable. Thousands of humans had gathered behind security barriers, their faces showing the mix of fear and curiosity that he had seen so many times before. Cameras flashed and recorded every moment as he walked toward the building where Earth's leaders waited. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo met him at the entrance with a delegation of officials from the planet's most powerful nations. She was a small woman with dark skin and gray hair, and her hands trembled slightly as she extended them in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," she said through a translator device, her voice carrying the nervous tone that Varan expected. "We are honored by your visit." Varan clicked his mandibles in what he hoped the humans would recognize as a smile. "The honor is ours, Secretary General," he replied smoothly. "The Valkyrie Dominion has watched your species with great interest, and we come offering friendship and protection to your world." He noticed the way her eyes flickered to his guards, tall warriors in armor that could withstand anything the humans might throw at them. "Good," he thought. "Let them see our strength and understand their position." The delegation led him through the building to a large chamber where representatives from every nation had gathered. Voran took his place at the head of the room and looked out at the sea of human faces. They were so small and fragile. These creatures, with their soft skin and their single pair of arms and their eyes that showed every emotion they felt. How had they ever survived on this dangerous world? He wondered, when they seemed so poorly designed for conflict. People of Earth, he began, his voice amplified by technology that made it boom through the chamber. I bring greetings from the Valkyrie Dominion, the greatest civilization in this region of the galaxy. He paused to let his words sink in, watching the translators relay his message to the assembled leaders. For 3,000 years, we have brought peace and order to countless worlds. And today we extend that same gift to you. A murmur ran through the crowd, and Varan felt satisfaction at their reaction. We understand that this is overwhelming, he continued in a gentler tone. Your species has believed itself alone in the universe, and now you discover that you are but one small world among thousands. He spread all four of his arms in a gesture meant to seem welcoming. But you need not fear, for the Dominion protects its friends, and we wish very much to be your friends. What Varan did not notice, because he was not looking for it, was the quiet communication happening among the human delegates. Small glances exchanged across the room, subtle nods, fingers tapping messages on hidden devices. Secretary General Okonkwo's fear seemed real enough, but if Varan had looked more closely, he might have seen something else beneath it, something like anticipation, and he certainly did not notice the tall man in a military uniform who sat silently at the back of the room, watching everything with calm and calculating eyes. Admiral Chen Wei had not spoken a single word since the aliens arrived, and no one had asked him to. His job was not to talk. His job was to wait and to watch, and to be ready for the moment when the masks would finally come off. That moment was coming soon. But Ambassador Varan had no way of knowing it. Was too busy feeling pleased with himself, too confident in the power of his fleet and the inevitability of human surrender. He had done this so many times before, and it had always worked. Why would this time be any different? High above the earth, hidden in the shadow of the moon, something vast and dark and patient waited in silence. Had been waiting for a very long time, and now, at last, it was almost time to wake up. The negotiations began the next morning in a conference room high above the streets of New York. Ambassador Varan sat at one end of a long table made of polished wood, his forearms folded in a posture of patient authority. Across from him sat Secretary General Okonkwo and her team of diplomats, their faces carefully neutral as they listened to what the Dominion had to offer. Beside Okonkwo sat Admiral Chen Wei, introduced only as a military liaison, and he had not spoken a single word in 3 days of talks. Varan found this amusing, as he assumed the human military leader was simply too intimidated to participate. The first 2 days had been filled with pleasantries and cultural exchanges, the kind of meaningless gestures that Varan had performed hundreds of times before. He showed them images of Dominion worlds, beautiful planets with gleaming cities and happy populations living under Valkyrie protection. He spoke of the wonders of galactic civilization, the technologies that could cure human diseases and extend human lifespans and solve the problems that plagued their primitive world. The humans listened with wide eyes and asked eager questions, and Varan allowed himself to feel confident that this would proceed smoothly. On the third day, he began to discuss the terms of humanity's membership in the Dominion. The transition will be gradual, he explained in his most reassuring voice. We understand that change is difficult for developing species. He activated a holographic display that showed the solar system, with Earth at its center. First, we will require exclusive access to your asteroid belt and outer planets for resource extraction, he said, gesturing at the distant rocks and gas giants. These materials are of no use to you currently, and we will compensate your world fairly for their value. The human diplomats exchanged glances, but said nothing. Second, we will establish cultural integration programs to help your people adapt to galactic society, Varn continued. This will include educational exchanges where young humans travel to Dominion worlds to learn our ways and bring that knowledge back to Earth. He did not mention that these young humans would be carefully selected and thoroughly indoctrinated before their return. He did not mention that this was how the Dominion slowly erased the cultures of the species it absorbed, replacing their identities with loyal obedience over generations. Third, we will station a permanent fleet in your system for protection, he said. And now his tone carried a slight edge. There are dangers in the galaxy that you cannot imagine, and our ships will keep you safe from these threats. Secretary General Okonkwo leaned forward slightly. And what would we need protection from, Ambassador? She asked in a quiet voice. Vorn clicked his mandibles in what passed for a Valkyrie smile. The universe is vast and dangerous, Secretary General, and there are species far less benevolent than the Dominion who might take interest in your world. He let the implication hang in the air, watching as the humans absorbed the unspoken threat. Finally, he said, we must discuss the matter of your military forces. The room grew very still. The Dominion provides all necessary security for its member worlds. Baran explained in a tone of patient condescension. Your primitive weapons and soldiers will no longer be needed, and their maintenance is a waste of resources that could be better spent on improving your civilization. He waved one of his hands dismissively. You will disband your armies, decommission your weapons, and allow our forces to handle all matters of defense. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Secretary General Okonkwo cleared her throat. Ambassador, these terms are quite extensive, she said carefully. Our people will need time to consider them. Varan had heard this response before, and he knew exactly how to handle it. Of course, he said smoothly. We are patient, and we understand that such decisions cannot be made quickly. He rose from his chair and walked to the window, looking out at the city below with its millions of inhabitants going about their tiny lives. But I feel I must be honest with you, Secretary General. His voice grew colder, and he turned to face the humans with all four of his eyes. My fleet currently orbits your world, and each of my ships carries weapons capable of destroying your largest cities within minutes. The diplomats shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but Okonkwo's expression did not change. We prefer diplomacy, Varan continued. We truly do, as it is so much cleaner than the alternative. But we are not limited to it. He let the threat settle over the room like a heavy blanket. The Dominion has never been refused, and I strongly suggest that Earth does not become the first to make that mistake. Silence filled the conference room, thick and heavy and suffocating. Then Admiral Chun Wei spoke for the first time in 3 days. Ambassador, may I ask you a question? Varan turned to look at the human military officer with mild surprise, as he had almost forgotten the man was there. Of course. Admiral, he said, with an amused click of his mandibles. Shun's voice was calm and measured, betraying no emotion whatsoever. In all the time your Dominion has been absorbing other species, how many have refused your terms? Varan found the question strange, but answered anyway. None, he said proudly. 237 species have joined us, and all of them recognize the wisdom of cooperation. Chun nodded slowly, as if this answer confirmed something he had already suspected. That is unfortunate. He said. Vorn tilted his head in confusion. Unfortunate? I would think it demonstrates the appeal of our offer. No, Chun replied. And now there was something different in his voice. Something hard and sharp, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. It means you have never learned what happens when someone says no. The Admiral reached into his pocket and withdrew a small device, placing it on the table in front of him. You came here expecting us to be afraid, he said. You expected us to tremble and beg and accept whatever crumbs you offered. He pressed a button on the device. You were wrong. Alarms began to sound on the communication devices carried by Varan's guards. The URAA's guards. The ambassador felt the first cold touch of something he had not experienced in a very long time. Uncertainty. What is happening? He demanded. Admiral Chen smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Allow me to introduce you to humanity's answer to your generous offer. Through the window, high above the earth, something impossible was happening. The sky itself seemed to be tearing open. And from that wound, in reality, something vast and terrible was emerging. Ambassador Varan stared at it with all four of his eyes. And for the first time in his long career, he felt the unfamiliar sensation of genuine fear. What, he whispered, is that? Secretary General Okonkwo rose from her chair, and all traces of nervousness had vanished from her face. That, Ambassador, is the reason we are not afraid. She straightened her jacket and looked at the alien with eyes that held no submission, only quiet and absolute resolve. Now then, shall we discuss our terms? In the cold emptiness beyond the moon, space itself began to break apart. It started as a tiny crack, a line of brilliant white light against the endless black. And then it grew wider and wider until it became a wound in the fabric of reality itself. The Foldgate, humanity's greatest secret, had been activated for the first time in the presence of alien eyes, and from that impossible doorway came a ship that should not have existed. The Prometheus Unchained emerged from the light like a monster rising from the depths of an ancient ocean 3 kilometers of angular black metal, scarred and battle-worn from conflicts that no alien database had ever recorded. Gun batteries the size of city blocks lined its hull in rows that seemed to go on forever. Engine cores at its rear burned with the captured light of dying stars, providing power that the Valkyrie could not begin to measure or understand. The ship moved slowly, deliberately, with the patient grace of something that had never known fear because it had never needed to abort the serenity of purpose. Chaos erupted like a storm. Officers screamed at their sensors, which were displaying readings that made no logical sense. The human ship was too big, too powerful, too advanced, and it had come from nowhere through technology the Dominion had never seen. Impossible. Ambassador Varan whispered as he watched the tactical display in the conference room, his mandibles clicking in uncontrollable agitation. Your species has no interstellar capability. Our scouts confirmed this. We watched you for decades. Admiral Chen stood beside him, hands clasped behind his back, watching the alien's reaction with calm satisfaction. Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted them to see, he said simply. Secretary General Okonkwo joined them at the display, her earlier mask of timidity completely abandoned. Humanity learned a very important lesson long before we ever reached for the stars, she explained. We learned that the universe does not reward the weak, and it does not protect the innocent. She gestured at the massive warship that now dominated the orbital space around Earth. So we prepared. Ambassador, quietly and patiently, building weapons we hoped we would never need. New signatures began appearing on the Valkyrie sensors, each one sending fresh waves of panic through the crew. A second Titan-class warship emerged from another Foldgate, identical in size and terrible beauty to the first, then a third and a fourth, until 12 of the massive vessels hung in space around Earth, one for each ship in the Valkyrie diplomatic fleet. But that was not all. Hundreds of smaller signatures followed, destroyers and cruisers and carriers that poured from the gates like an endless swarm of angry insects. Fighter craft launched from the carriers in formations so precise they seemed to move as a single organism within minutes. The Valkyrie fleet was completely surrounded by a force that outnumbered and outgunned them by a margin that was almost embarrassing. Ambassador Varan felt his legs grow weak beneath him, and he had to grip the edge of a table to keep from falling. "This cannot be real," he said, though his voice carried no conviction. "You are a primitive species. You were supposed to be easy." Admiral Chun turned to face him fully, and there was no mercy in his expression. "Let me tell you something about humanity, Ambassador." He stepped closer to the alien, close enough that Varan could see every line on his weathered face. "We spent 10,000 years fighting each other before we ever looked to the stars. Fighting over land and resources and ideas and things so trivial that we have forgotten what they were." He began to pace slowly, his voice carrying the weight of ages. "We invented weapons that could destroy our entire world. And then we invented more, always finding new and more creative ways to kill each other." He stopped and looked out the window at the Titan-class ships that now ruled the sky. "When we finally reached space and began to wonder what we might find out there, we did not assume we would find friends." His voice grew harder. "We assumed we would find exactly what you are. Predators who prey on the weak and call it civilization." Admiral Chun activated his communication device and spoke in a voice that was broadcast to every Valkyrie ship. "Attention all Dominion vessels. This is Admiral Chun Wei of the Terran Defense Force on the bridges of 12 alien ships." Terrified crews listened to a voice they had expected to beg. For 80 years, humanity has watched the stars and prepared for this moment, building weapons in secret and hiding our strength from eyes that might be watching. The Prometheus Unchained turned slowly, bringing its main gun batteries to bear on the serenity of purpose. We built these ships hoping we would never need them, hoping that when we finally met our neighbors in the galaxy, they would come in peace and treat us as equals. His voice grew cold. "Instead, you came with threats hidden behind smiles, offering slavery wrapped in pretty words. The weapon systems of every human ship activated simultaneously, and the Valkyrie sensors screamed with targeting warnings. Humanity does not kneel," Admiral Chun declared. "We never have, and we never will." He turned back to Ambassador Varan, who stood frozen in shock and growing terror. "Your scouts watched us for decades and saw a divided world of primitive nations squabbling among themselves." A thin smile crossed his face. What they did not see were the underground facilities on the dark side of the moon, or the shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt, or the Fold Gate research stations that we kept shielded from all outside observation. He leaned closer to the ambassador. They did not see the unified command structure that every nation on Earth has secretly maintained for 50 years, preparing for the day when we would face exactly this situation. Varan's mandibles clicked uselessly as he tried to find words. "You have been watching us," he finally managed. "But we have also been watching you," Admiral Chun nodded. "For 6 years, our ships have operated in Dominion space, observing your fleets, mapping your defenses, learning your weaknesses." This revelation hit Varan like a physical blow. "You knew where every one of your warships was stationed before you ever entered our system," Chen continued. "You knew how long it would take for reinforcements to reach you. You let that sink in, and you came anyway, alone and arrogant, to threaten the one species in this galaxy that has spent its entire existence perfecting the art of war." In the silence that followed, Ambassador Varan understood with terrible clarity that everything he had believed about this mission was wrong. The humans had never been prey. They had been waiting, and now the trap had closed around him. Ambassador Varan's mind raced through possibilities with desperate speed, searching for any option that might save him and his fleet from the impossible situation. They now faced military options were immediately discarded, as even a brief glance at the tactical display showed how hopeless any fight would be his. 12 ships were surrounded by hundreds of human vessels, And those massive Titan-class warships could probably destroy his entire fleet without even bothering to aim carefully. Escape was equally impossible, as the human ships had positioned themselves to block every possible retreat vector. Even if he ordered an immediate jump to faster than light speed, his vessels would be destroyed before their engines could charge. For the first time in 3,000 years of Dominion expansion, a diplomatic mission had failed completely and utterly. Vaughan turned to face Admiral Chun and Secretary General Okonkwo, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the fear that churned in his stomach. "You would risk war with the entire Dominion?" he demanded, trying to salvage some authority from the ruins of his position. "Do you have any idea what forces could be brought against you?" Admiral Chun seemed almost amused by the question. "Ambassador, your nearest reinforcements are approximately 18 months away at your fastest travel speed," he replied calmly. "We know this because we have ships in your territory that have been tracking your fleet movements for years." He walked to the tactical display and pointed at various positions. "Your third battle group is stationed at Velkar Prime. Your second is patrolling the Outer Rim territories, and your home fleet remains in defensive positions around your capital worlds." Varan felt his blood grow cold as the human casually listed information that should have been among the Dominion's most closely guarded secrets. None of them could reach Earth in less than a year. And by then, this conversation will be long over. The ambassador grasped at his last remaining argument. "But surely you understand that war with the Dominion would be devastating for your species," he said. "Even if you destroyed my fleet today, others would come. And they would come with far greater force." Secretary General Okonkwo stepped forward, and her voice was patient but firm. "We do not want war. Ambassador, we never did." She gestured at the window, where the Titan-class ships hung in the darkness like silent guardians. "These weapons were built for defense, not conquest. And we have no desire to use them against anyone." Her eyes met his directly. "But understand this. Humanity spent 10,000 years fighting itself, surviving ice ages and plagues and wars that killed hundreds of millions of our people." She paused to let her words sink in. "Every nightmare your species tells its children, every horror story about monsters in the dark. We have lived through worse and survived." Admiral Chun rejoined the conversation. "We are not afraid of war, Ambassador, because war is what we know best." He spoke without pride or boasting, simply stating a fact. "But we would prefer peace, real peace between equals, not the false peace of subjugation that your Dominion offers." Varan looked between the two humans, trying to read their intentions. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked carefully. Okonkwo reached into a folder and withdrew a document, sliding it across the table to the ambassador. "These are our terms," she said. "Read them carefully." Varan picked up the document with trembling hands and began to read. The terms were comprehensive, but surprisingly reasonable. Humanity was not demanding tribute or territory or the dissolution of the Dominion. Instead, they were asking for something far more dangerous to Velkari supremacy: equality trade agreements between the Dominion and Earth, negotiated as partners rather than as master and servant. Cultural exchange programs that were genuinely voluntary, with humans free to participate or decline as they chose. No Dominion fleet presence in human space, and no human fleet presence in Dominion space without express invitation. Most importantly, formal recognition of humanity as a sovereign power with rights equal to those of the Velkari themselves. "This is unacceptable," Varan said automatically, his diplomatic training overriding his fear. "The Dominion does not negotiate as equals with primitive species." Admiral Chun's expression did not change. "Then you are welcome to try your luck with your weapons, Ambassador." He gestured at the tactical display. "I should warn you that our targeting systems have already locked onto every vital system on your ships. and my gunners are very, very good at their jobs." The threat hung in the air. Calm and absolute, Voran looked at the display again, at the 12 Titan-class ships that could end his existence in seconds, and felt something break inside him. He had built his entire career on the assumption that the Dominion was invincible, that no species could stand against their might. Now that assumption lay shattered at his feet, and he had to face a new reality. "If I agree to these terms," he said slowly, "how do I know you will honor them?" Okonkwo's expression softened slightly. "Because we are not like you, Ambassador." She leaned forward. "We do not lie about our intentions or hide our strength behind false smiles. And when we make a promise, we keep it." She gestured at the warships outside. "Those ships could have destroyed your fleet the moment you entered our system. But we chose to talk first." Her voice grew firm again. "We are offering you something your Dominion has never offered anyone else. A fair deal between peoples who respect each other." Varan was silent for a long moment. "The Dominion Council will not be pleased," he finally said. "Probably not," Admiral Chun agreed. "But they are very far away, and you are very close to our guns." He almost smiled. "I suggest you make the wise choice." The ambassador looked at the document again, then at the weapons pointed at his ships, then at the two humans who watched him with patient and unyielding eyes. He had come to this world expecting easy prey. He had found something else entirely, with a hand that no longer trembled. Varan picked up a pen and signed the document. "I hope you understand what you have started," he said quietly. Secretary General Okonkwo took the signed document and nodded. "We understand perfectly, Ambassador." She looked out at the stars with eyes that held no fear. "We have started something that should have been started long ago." Her voice carried the weight of a species that had waited too long to take its rightful place in the universe. "We have started treating with aliens as equals, and we have proven that humanity will not bow to anyone." She turned back to Varan with a smile that was almost kind. "I suggest you return to your council and explain this new reality to them." The ambassador nodded slowly, knowing that his entire world had changed in the span of a single day. "And if they choose not to accept these terms?" he asked. Admiral Chun answered that question. "Then we will be ready," he said simply. "As we have always been ready." He looked at the Prometheus unchained through the window. "And next time, we will not be so gentle." 3 months had passed since the day the aliens came, and the world had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Treaty of Geneva, as it came to be called, was signed in a grand ceremony broadcast to every nation on Earth and transmitted across the galaxy on frequencies that the Dominion used for official communications. Ambassador Varan stood beside Secretary General Okonkwo as they exchanged the final documents, his forearms stiff with formal dignity. Despite the defeat that burned in his heart, billions of humans watched from their homes and gathering places, many of them learning for the first time about the secret preparations their governments had made to protect them. There was anger at first, anger at being kept in the dark about such important matters. But that anger faded quickly when people understood what had been at stake. The alternative to secrecy had been extinction. And when viewed in that light, the deception seemed not only forgivable, but wise. The Valkyrie diplomatic fleet departed Earth's orbit 1 week after the treaty was signed. Their silver ships and crystal towers diminished somehow in the shadow of the Titan-class warships that escorted them to the edge of the solar system Var, and stood on the bridge of the serenity of purpose and watched Earth shrink behind him, knowing that he would spend the rest of his career explaining this failure to superiors who would not want to hear it. The Dominion Council would rage and threaten, but in the end, they would accept the treaty because they had no other choice. Sending a war fleet to Earth would take years and cost resources that the Dominion could not easily spare, and even then, victory was far from certain against a species that had proven so unexpectedly capable aboard the Prometheus Unchained. Admiral Chun Wei stood on the observation deck and watched the alien ships grow smaller and smaller until they finally vanished into the light of their faster-than-light engines. He did not feel triumph or satisfaction, only a quiet sense of duty fulfilled behind him. Footsteps approached, and he turned to see Secretary General Okonkwo walking toward him with 2 glasses of amber liquid in her hands. "Whiskey," she said, offering him one. "I thought we might celebrate, or at least drink to something." Chan accepted the glass with a small nod of thanks. "What should we drink to?" He asked. Okonkwo considered the question as she looked out at the star-scattered darkness. "To humanity, perhaps," she said finally. "To our survival and our future." They touched glasses and drank in comfortable silence. "Do you think they will come back?" Okonkwo asked after a long moment. Chan lowered his glass and thought about the question carefully. "Eventually," he said. "Probably with more ships and probably with allies, but not soon." And not in the same way. He turned to face her. "We have given them something to think about. Something they have never had to consider before." "And what is that?" "The knowledge that they can be refused," Chan replied. "The understanding that there are limits to their power." He looked back at the stars. For 3,000 years, every species they encountered either submitted or was destroyed. And now they have met one that did neither. He almost smiled. That knowledge will spread through their dominion like fire, reaching every species they have absorbed and every world they have conquered. Okonkwo understood immediately. "The other species will hear about us," she said. "Yes, they will." Chan's voice grew thoughtful. "They will hear that a species called humanity stood against the Velkari and did not bend. And they will begin to wonder what might have happened if they had done the same." He set down his empty glass. "We have not just won a treaty today, Secretary General. We have planted a seed of doubt in an empire built on the assumption of invincibility. Below them, Earth turned slowly in the darkness, its cities glittering like scattered jewels across the night side. Billions of people went about their lives, most of them still processing the revelations of the past. Few months children played games about space battles and alien invasions, their imaginations fired by the drama they had witnessed. Scientists and engineers worked feverishly to understand the technologies that had been declassified after the treaty, preparing for a future among the stars. Young men and women applied in record numbers to the newly revealed Terran Defense Force, eager to serve aboard the great ships that had protected their world. Humanity had spent millennia believing they were alone in the universe, and that belief had shaped everything about their civilization. Now they knew the truth, and that truth was both terrifying and wonderful. The stars were full of life, some of it hostile, some of it indifferent, and none of it particularly interested in treating humanity kindly. But humanity had survived before against terrible odds, and they would survive again. They had crawled out of caves and crossed oceans and split the atom, and walked on the moon. They had endured ice ages that lasted thousands of years, and plagues that killed half their population, and wars that seemed like they would never end every time the universe had tried to destroy them. They had found a way to continue. This was simply the next challenge. Larger in scale, but no different in nature. Admiral Chan finished his drink and straightened his uniform. "We have much work to do," he said. "The Dominion will not accept this treaty forever, and there are other powers in the galaxy who will take notice of what happened here." Okonkwo nodded. "The politicians will want to talk and negotiate and form committees," she said with a slight smile. "That is their nature. Let them," Chan replied. "But while they talk, we will build more ships and train more crews and prepare for whatever comes next." He looked at the Prometheus Unchained, at the great vessel that had become a symbol of human determination. "We showed the galaxy what we are today, but that is only the beginning." His voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for battles he hoped would never come. Humanity has taken its first step onto the galactic stage, and we will not be pushed back into the shadows. Okonkwo joined him at the window and looked out at the infinite darkness filled with infinite possibilities. Do you ever wonder what they think of us now? She asked. The aliens, I mean. After everything they have seen, Chun considered the question. I think they are afraid, he said finally. Or at least they are beginning to be. He turned to face her. They came here expecting sheep and found wolves instead. And now they must decide whether to make peace with the wolves or try to hunt them. A thin smile crossed his weathered face. I suspect they will choose peace. At least for now, but they will never forget what they learned about us. He looked back at Earth one more time. The star sent predators to our door. Secretary General. Predators who had never known defeat. His voice grew soft but certain. They found something older and harder. Something forged in ice ages and world wars, in plagues and fire. In 10,000 years of refusing to die, he turned away from the window and walked toward the bridge. Ready to return to his duties, they found humanity, he said over his shoulder. And humanity was ready. Behind him, the stars burned cold and bright and infinite, and somewhere among them, the Valkyrie Dominion was learning a lesson they would never forget. The universe was not theirs alone. Any more humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again.